This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening. I'm Rubio to tonight's top stories. America's top diplomat heads to Manila for an ASEAN ministerial meeting in an in-person pledge of support. Marco Rubio also attending talks for the Quad grouping, focused on parallel concerns in security and trade. Authorities in China call for safeguards in areas prone to landslides. Teams blast through rock to find survivors in a rain-triggered collapse in Chongqing, amid more downpours forecast across many provinces. South Korea's AI-fueled stock market rally losing steam. Investors pulling back after recent volatility. They're looking elsewhere for the next big opportunity. Singapore's acting minister in charge of Muslim affairs resigns, citing personal reasons. The PM's office reporting receipt of an email on interactions between associate professor Faishal Ibrahim and a woman. And also tonight, from the drawing board to the ironing board, Shanghai showcases AI-powered helpers for daily chores. That's gaining popularity. And beating the bulge in China while weight loss camps are drawing local and foreign visitors. Top U.S. diplomat Marco Rubio is on his way to Manila, the Secretary of State, to speak to Quad counterparts on the sidelines of an ASEAN meeting of foreign ministers. Mr. Rubio says he sees the Chinese president proceeding with a planned visit to the United States. That is despite recent claims by President Donald Trump of Beijing interfering in U.S. elections.
We anticipate that the trip is happening in September. They've continued to send over their teams to prepare for it. I've heard nothing otherwise. I have no reason to believe that they won't be coming.
And CNA's senior correspondent Leong Wai-Kit joins us live from Metro Manila. Wai-Kit, Mr. Rubio will have several functions he needs to serve. We just heard him there pouring oil on the waters, easing tensions. What else can we expect in his visit to the Philippines?
Well, I'm keeping a lookout for the Quad meeting that he talked about, and if this happens, it's significant on various fronts. On the front of historical count, if you will. If you remember, Quad was formed decades ago, 2004, but the talks were only revived about 10 years ago in 2017, right here in the city of Manila, also right here on the platform of an ASEAN sideline meeting. And back then, the Quad members had come together to discuss issues, primarily because there was concern of China's assertiveness on the Indo-Pacific. Now, if you fast forward to today, the second reason it's significant is perhaps there is renewed reason to talk about security concerns among the Quad members, because hours ago, the Philippines had just issued a statement accusing the China side of aggressive behavior on the maritime front. I was told this incident happened slightly after 9 a.m. Singapore-Philippine time. The China Coast Guard was said to be approaching the second Thomas Shoal, and it had allegedly used wooden oars to hit the personnel of the Philippine Navy. There was a photograph circulated to show the extent of the injury. There was a video circulated to show the extent of the whole situation. And this again underlines that there is tension between the Philippines and China, and at least from the Philippines' point of view, that there is still ongoing assertive actions on the part of China. Of course, China will be watching this very closely. We also know how China views Quad as a grouping. It has used language such as accusing the group as being a small clique promoting Cold War mentality and targeting third parties. Now, this week there are many meetings I'm keeping a lookout for, but it is 2026 July. It is at the halfway point of ASEAN chairmanship. I spoke to some analysts to ask them to assess the topics that were discussed and how they look at the assessment of those topics in the first half of the year. Let's take a look.
Rising oil prices, a fuel supply crisis, trade route disruption. Key concerns that were discussed at ASEAN meetings earlier this year as a result of the Middle East crisis. Halfway through 2026, how is ASEAN faring in managing this fuel shortage? One ASEAN energy expert says the bloc's coping better than others around the world. The strategy: diversifying partners, reducing dependency, and rolling out short-term measures to cope with fuel shortage.
The real fix is really in dismantling structural dependencies on fossil fuel in the long term. And the clearest way forward is to accelerate regional decarbonization efforts, harness renewable energy sources for power generation, and improve regional energy interconnectivity. So in this regard, I'm really talking about accelerating the operationalization of the ASEAN Power Grid, which is a key prong for ASEAN.
The ASEAN Power Grid, or APG for short, is a mega project for the bloc to share energy. For the initiative to succeed, governments need to link up infrastructure, modernize grids, invest in battery development, and also fine-tune policies. But Ms. Seah warns that there's an even more urgent concern: food security.
Because there's a lack in terms of food, there's still a fairly reasonable amounts has been produced in the last season, and in which also countries in the region has already diversified many of their food sources. So that kind of impact will not be seen until later. But if we can mitigate some of these impacts, right, then it will be much lessened.
Another key topic is the Myanmar crisis, which saw a significant development following recent meetings between ASEAN's top diplomats and the Myanmar foreign minister.
The recent meeting between ASEAN foreign ministers and Myanmar's foreign minister Tin Maung Swe wasn't a sudden development. ASEAN Chair of the Philippines had revealed this plan earlier this year. But what's significant is that the meeting was held in person, despite some ASEAN members objecting to it. Thanks to Thailand's efforts, this was the first such gathering, even though it was couched as an informal meeting. That's because formally, ASEAN's view is that neither Myanmar leader Min Aung Hlaing nor his foreign minister will be invited to ASEAN meetings unless they fully comply with the 5-point consensus.
ASEAN countries are not fools. No? They know that Min Aung Hlaing has accepted the 5-point consensus but done nothing about it. So why should they go on being nice to him? So I think that those steps that they took about excluding him from key meetings, I think that's a correct approach. Of course, Thailand is a special case because it's taken in the largest number of refugees, and also there's a large Myanmar labor force in Thailand, almost a part of Thailand. So Thailand has a special stake in it.
Naypyidaw is likely to play up this engagement as a step closer to normalizing ties with ASEAN. But some ASEAN members have stressed that engagement does not mean recognition. So, what's next for ASEAN-Myanmar ties?
They're sort of prepared to wait and see where the whole group wants to go. And because ASEAN works on consensus, they are very likely to kind of internally recalibrate, have those discussions within themselves, amongst themselves.
In the short term, such ASEAN-Myanmar engagements can serve as direct and informal channels for closed-door diplomacy to move the needle on Myanmar. But as ASEAN has stressed numerous times, any final resolution has to be Myanmar-owned and Myanmar-led.
Now, still staying on Myanmar, ASEAN foreign ministers would have to discuss the progress made by the Min Aung Hlaing-led administration before deciding if there should be a second or a next-level engagement.
Well, thanks. That's CNA's senior correspondent Leong Mai Kit. They're speaking to us from Metro Manila. Rescue teams in China racing to find survivors days after landslide in Chongqing buried residential buildings last Friday. They're using explosives to blast their way through heavy boulders, hoping to find and reach 34 people who are still missing. The disaster in Pengshui County claiming at least 8 lives. On-site surveys finding that the largest detached boulder was about the size of a residential building. Search and rescue hindered by the mountainous terrain, with forecasts of more heavy rains across multiple provinces likely to further complicate the situation. 8 rivers in cities such as Yunnan, Guangdong, and Shanghai are already above flood warning levels. Transport systems also affected. Some passenger service on the Shanghai-Kunming route reportedly suspended yesterday. Firefighters in South Korea have spent more than 2 days battling a massive blaze at Coupang's warehouse in Incheon. They are still at this. Right now, the e-commerce company says all workers have been safely evacuated. Fire started Saturday. It's been burning for more than 57 hours. Authorities say the blaze started on the 6th floor of the firm's fulfillment center. More than 800 firefighters have been deployed to the scene. An evacuation order has been issued for the areas surrounding the warehouse, and an elementary school and 14 daycare centers are shut today. Officials plan to conduct an investigation after the blaze is fully extinguished. Still on East Asia tonight, China's Chongqing Innolight looking to Hong Kong to raise more funds as it contemplates a second listing that could turn out to be the largest in 7 years. Plus, a global tech rout pushing pressure on China's markets just as blockbuster listings loom can support from policy. Keep that rally alive, are investors turning more cautious? We put those questions to a Chinese equities expert. Roland Lim is here with the business news and more specifically market news. Shanghai A shares, tech shares as well, getting some relief today.
Yes, indeed, yeah. After last week's 20% retreat to record high on the Star 50 index, well, A shares today rebounded in anticipation of more support from regulators. The Greater China markets mixed after Chinese state-owned investors pledged further purchases of stocks following a sharp sell-off last week. The China Securities Regulatory Commission meeting with listed firms, brokerages and mutual funds to discuss how to stabilize the stock market. Now, that's happening as the Shanghai Star 50 index slipped into bear territory last week. Two state-backed firms bought Chinese stocks for about $9 billion to stem the decline. Now, China Reform as well as China Chongqing both stepped in and said they would continue to buy both stocks and ETFs tied to the central government-owned enterprises and tech firms. And the number of state shareholders are also pledging to increase their stake in listed subsidiaries or to buy back shares. Quick check on the currency. The yuan firmed slightly against a directionless US dollar after China left its benchmark lending rates unchanged for the 14th consecutive month, in line with market expectations. And to find out whether the sell-off last week is overdone, William Ma, Global Chief Investment Officer at Grow Investment Group, joins us live from Shanghai. William, the Chinese equities have been holding up better than most global markets, but that Star 50 index, that fell about 25% from its July peak. Has that gone beyond a healthy correction, do you think?
Yes, actually, I think the first leg of so-called deleverage has been cooling down a little bit. And to be honest, the sell-off is majority driven by the so-called global AI fatigue. If you look at the share price of SpaceX, and not to mention some of the high flyer, in Korea, in Taiwan, I think the magnitude of the correction is not too material while we are seeing some rotation. But fundamentally, I think there are many things the government is trying to do and to support the so-called, sentiment of the whole, market and sectors.
And Beijing has once again called on state-backed buyers to buy about 60 billion yuan of purchases, which is rather small compared to the roughly 10 trillion yuan that's wiped off the market. Now, is this enough to restore confidence, or do you think this is just a short-term fix?
I think the signal, is more important than the amount, if you like. And this comes a very, timely, manner, to the market, if you like. Because people are also worrying about the overall, US market, Asia market, ripple to the domestic China market. So coming back of the regulator in supporting buying some of the ETF is a, good short-term, fix, if you like. And fundamentally, I think the China market is cheap, and also there are positive earning growth. So my view is despite this quiet summer, but the stepping back would try to pull back a little bit the aggressive sell-off in the tech sector globally in the last week or two.
So somewhat of a short-term fix, but every time the markets come under pressure, investors appear to expect Beijing's national team to intervene. Now, we've seen this playbook before. Does that create a market then that's increasingly dependent on policy protection?
Yes and no. I would suggest that the Chinese government is trying to create positive catalyst or signal to the market that the policy support is here. And actually they are buying different ETF, if you like. I think fundamentally retail investor really want to buy equities, buy growth, and there are so many IPOs, AI and tech related. Because if you look at the saving rate in the Chinese bank, actually they are at a very low level, 1.5%, 2%. So naturally, investors want to invest in the market. But at the same time, I think the hype is too much towards AI tech related. And the good news, if you like, we are seeing a rotation within the market besides the AI and tech sector, and there are some other sectors is actually recovering or benefiting from this. So I'm not too worried about the sell down, if you like.
Now, speaking of the AI play, we are also watching a busy IPO pipeline, including the listing of memory chip maker CXMT. What signal does that send about confidence in China's equity markets?
I think it would be a very successful and dramatic IPO. If you look at the list of the so-called cornerstone investor or institutional investor trying to get an allocation of the listing, you've seen some blue chip names. And then the so-called allocation rate for the retail investor is less than 0.5%. So which means basically in the China market is a shortage of this type of memory chip or DRAM player in the region. And then the second point is I'm expecting some of the global investor would want to participate in this sector as well, because at the end of the day, the end consumer of this companies is besides the global firm is a majority of the Chinese company. So Chinese company is trying to build an ecosystem across this so-called AI supply chain or infrastructure play. And down the road, at the end of the day, it's about correlation. So I think the Chinese domestic equity market is to create a less correlated ecosystem compared to the US and European group, which provide opportunity for domestic investor and global investor for this investment theme.
So concerns over geopolitics and chip restrictions, that's likely to weigh less on investors' minds when it comes to an IPO like CXMT.
Yes, that is a very relevant consideration. And I think there is two sides of the picture, if you like. If there is more so-called regulations or sanction on the chip export, if you like, potentially that also drive the domestic Chinese company to buy more on this type of chip and create its own supply chain. So I think at the end of the day is whether export of the chip or export of the end product being tariff and sanction. To me, this is an uncertainty on the market. I think one thing is investors are talking about AI investment and earnings growth. But what the biggest risk we are seeing in the market is what if potentially President Trump is coming back to talk about the tariff further sanction. That might cool off a little bit on the market. But overall, the China Asia market is trading at mid-teens type of earnings. The first half of this year, we are talking about 8 to 10% earnings growth. For the whole year, 15%. So I think fundamentally, China Asia market is attractive on its own and is not going up too much compared to Korea and Taiwan, who has been up 50% year to date. I think China is still lagging the rest of the region.
Speaking of price earnings, before I let you go, where do you see genuine value in Chinese equities? Are you going to continue buying AI semiconductor stocks or maybe rotate into the less crowded areas?
Well, we are rotating, just, joking aside, if you see some of the companies who go up very big, today is Mao Tai, the white wine liquor manufacturer, they were up, 6%. And in this type of hot weather, I'm talking to some of the global peer group, they should look at some manufacturing companies like Medea, the largest white good manufacturer. I think they outperform, some of the AI names that who had significant correction, in the Hong Kong in the last month or so by 20%. Last but not least, I'm also pointing out people to look at Tencent, Meituan, for example, has been up 20%, in the last month or two. So I believe the AI theme is a investing interesting theme, but at the same time, the China market also have some domestic consumption or AI-enabled, sector that for global investor to participate on the market, potential second leg rally to catch up, the lag behind Korea and Taiwan for the second half of this year.
William, we will be keeping an eye on those stocks you mentioned. That was William Ma, Global CIO of Grow Investment Group. China's artificial intelligence race is heating up despite the market volatility. New AI models, major fundraising, and strong demand for chip investments are signaling China's growing challenge to U.S. technology leadership. Now, Bloomberg reports that Chinese startup Moonshot AI is preparing for a Hong Kong listing as early as 6 months from now. The company has reportedly begun seeking shareholder approval for an IPO. It's also closing a funding round that could value the 3-year-old firm at more than $30 billion. The fundraising follows the launch of Kimi K3. That's an AI model that Moonshot says trails only behind Anthropic's Claude Fable 5. And just as it seeks fresh funding, the company has temporarily paused new subscriptions after demand for its Kimi K3 model strained capacity. The competition is also intensifying. Alibaba has unveiled its latest flagship AI model, Qwen 3.8 Max, describing it as among the world's most capable AI systems. The launch builds on Alibaba's growing AI ambitions after it was chosen as Apple's local technology partner for Apple Intelligence in China. The AI push is also driving investments into semiconductor companies. Now, China's top memory chip maker CXMT says its $8.6 billion Shanghai IPO was more than 570 times oversubscribed ahead of its expected market debut later this month. The strong demand for the IPO signals continued investor confidence in firms supporting Beijing's drive for semiconductor self-sufficiency. China's Zhongqi Innolite is sizing up appetite for what could be Hong Kong's largest listing since Alibaba's 7 years ago. Bloomberg reports the company is meeting investors and could start taking orders this week to raise as much as $8 billion. Now, that would propel the listings collected on the Hong Kong exchange past last year's entire total. Hong Kong is looking to ride China's tech wave with a bumper crop of listings, raising more than $26 billion in the first half of this year. The territory was the top IPO market last year, but it's lost that crown to NASDAQ following SpaceX's almost $86 billion IPO last month. Shares surged as much as 8% before paring some of those gains, ending the day up more than 2.5%. Now, South Korea's KOSPI extending its decline after investors returned from a long weekend, dragged down by chip heavyweights Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix. Now, the KOSPI has lost nearly a third of its value from an all-time high set just a month ago. That's amid increasing volatility brought on by single-stock leveraged ETFs. The financial instruments tied to the chip-making titans have drawn sharp criticisms for amplifying gains and losses, with much of the anger pointed at the government. Now, South Korean retailers have poured in more than $9 billion into ETFs since they were launched late May. Many of them are now nursing steep losses as the tide's turning against their favor.
제가 이제 가장 큰 실패가 온 날에 일단 숨이 안 쉬어졌어요. 갑자기 진짜 딱 되게 새하얘지더라고요. 왜냐하면은 이게 쭉 이렇게 자본이 쌓여 있다가 그게 한 순간에 사라져 버리니까 일단 거기에 대한 공허함이 오고, 그리고 뭔가 예를 들어 지하철을 타다가 택시를 타던 그런 삶을 다시 영위할 수 없다라는 압박감이 엄청 컸던 것 같아요.
Yesterday, Citi downgraded South Korea's stock market to neutral from overweight, citing recent volatility in chip stocks in recent weeks. The Finance Ministry has taken measures to rein in volatility by halting new listings of leveraged ETFs, tripling the minimum cash deposit amount, and banning advertisements of the ETFs themselves. A quick check on oil prices. They are scaling back gains as Iran says diplomatic exchanges with the U.S. were ongoing via mediators despite renewed conflict in the Middle East. Quick check, Brent crude is currently steady at $88.08, unchanged. U.S. market, West Texas Intermediate, $82.03. That's down about 0.5%. Now, but prices have gained more than 23% in July amid fears of a sustained Hormuz disruption, putting them on track for their biggest monthly gain since March. And that'll do it for Business News. Wei Su, back to you.
And thanks for that, Roland. Still ahead on East Asia tonight, the U.S. expands a bombing campaign across Iran for a 9th straight night as Tehran sustains its strikes on American assets in the Gulf. And the space race is back on with new rivals and big ambitions more than 50 years after the first man on the moon. This is East Asia tonight, and these are the headlines. Security issues expected to be high on Marco Rubio's agenda, with the top U.S. diplomat due to speak with his Quad counterparts at the ASEAN meeting on the sidelines of the ASEAN meeting in Manila. South Korea's stock market in free fall, AI-fueled bets unraveling, sending shares to a 3-month low and wiping out more than a quarter of the market's value in just 1 month. Still ahead, fighting the flab in China, why more locals and overseas visitors are signing up for weight loss camps. Here in Singapore, Associate Professor Faishal Ibrahim has resigned from office due to what he has described as personal reasons. The Prime Minister's office says this comes after it received an email from a female member of the public about a month ago concerning her interactions with Associate Professor Faishal. PMO says Senior Minister of State Zaki Mohammed will take over as Acting Minister for Muslim Affairs. PMO says most of the interactions between the woman and Associate Professor Faishal, who was then Acting Minister in charge of Muslim Affairs, took place through online messages. They also met on the sidelines of public events. PMO adds it spoke to Associate Professor Faishal and the woman separately to understand their different accounts. They both subsequently alleged harassment against the other. The matter was referred to the police. After investigations, it was assessed that no criminal offence had been committed and no criminal action was to be taken against either. In a letter to the PM, Associate Professor Faishal says while there had been no physical relationship between him and the woman, nor had there been any intent, there was, quote, a lapse of judgment in the way he had handled interactions. He also admits he failed to establish clearer boundaries at an earlier stage. Associate Professor Faishal says he recognizes that his conduct fell short of expected standards and was not consistent with the responsibilities entrusted to him. In a later Facebook post, he says he is deeply sorry to have let down residents and supporters who have placed their trust in him. Addressing the resignation, Prime Minister Lawrence Wong says he appreciates Associate Professor Faishal acknowledging the shortcomings of his conduct and his decision to take responsibility. The Prime Minister also recognized his significant contributions over the last 20 years of public service. Iran says diplomatic exchanges continue via mediators despite more than a week of trading fire with the United States. America's top diplomat saying Washington is still open to negotiations, but any diplomacy, Marco Rubio says, has to be, quote, real. U.S. launching its 9th straight night of attacks targeting Iranian military air defense and maritime capabilities. Another American service member has been killed in Iraq, the third in recent days, while Tehran reports at least one person dead in the northwest. Iran launching retaliatory strikes on U.S. bases in the Gulf, including in Kuwait, Bahrain and Jordan. And the Strait of Hormuz, meanwhile, far from resolved, Iran says it attacked and immobilized 2 oil tankers, repeating that the waterway will remain unsafe and it will not allow passage of even a single drop of oil and gas. Tehran also warning American troops to prepare for a, quote, punitive operation. The U.S. Secretary of State accusing Iran of using Hormuz as leverage in the conflict. Marco Rubio urging other countries to join the United States and to step up to protect global shipping. Traffic in the strait remains low amid intensifying attacks, shipping data showing just a dozen vessels transiting over the weekend. No liquefied natural gas tankers have been spotted passing through since Thursday. The waterway, which used to handle a fifth of the global oil trade, has been a flashpoint in the U.S.-Iran war, both sides taking aim at ships, the U.S. enforcing its blockade on Iranian ports, and Iran targeting vessels that it says violate its so-called rules on the conduit. Today marks International Moon Day, 57 years since Apollo 11. That's when Neil Armstrong took humanity's first step on the lunar surface. But unlike the Cold War space race between the US and the Soviet Union, the world is now witnessing a new moon race. CNA's Julie Yu tells us more.
More than half a century after the U.S. put the first humans on the moon, a new lunar race is taking shape. Now, this time, the main challenger is China. But today's competition is much more than planting a flag. Nations are competing to build the first long-term human presence beyond Earth. The prize is the moon's south pole. The scientists believe its permanently shadowed craters hold water ice, a resource that could provide drinking water, oxygen, and even rocket fuel. That means future spacecraft could one day refuel on the moon instead of carrying everything from Earth, making deeper space missions cheaper and more practical. Well, the U.S. is pursuing that vision through NASA's Artemis program, supported by more than 60 countries under the Artemis Accords. Earlier this year, Artemis 2 carried astronauts around the moon for the first time in more than half a century. NASA is targeting a crewed landing by 2028, following another test mission in 2027, although the Artemis program has faced several delays and schedule changes. Now, China is moving just as quickly. Its Chang'e program has already landed on the moon's far side and returned samples from a region never explored before. Now, later this year, Chang'e 7 will head to the lunar South Pole in search of water ice as Beijing works towards landing astronauts before 2030 and building its own lunar research station.
And with more space-related coverage on all of our platforms, including CNA.Asia, read about China's historic Sunday launch, which saw an astronaut head to orbit for a full year-long stay as Beijing gears up to land humans on the moon by 2030. Robo-dogs and dancing robots are headlining tech shows everywhere, but it's the robots doing everyday work that are taking center stage in Shanghai. And that took place over the weekend. Crystal Xia takes us on a tour of the World AI Conference.
The promise of the X-Men R1 is to eliminate an everyday chore. It's currently on trial at hotels, gathering dirty linen, loading it into the washing machine, and finally, folding the clean laundry. Its maker, Kinon Robotics, says more than half of their business is overseas, in the US, Europe, Japan, and South Korea, where there's a labor crunch.
从过去的就是更多是在炫技、展示形式的这样的一个表演，而进入到就是现在可以看到，就是大部分都在展示到底怎么去做好一个任务。我觉得来讲也是个必然的变化，因为最终来讲，所有的技术都要去应用到实际的工作中去真正去体现出它的这个价值。
The use of humanoid robots in real life is front and center at this year's World AI Conference in Shanghai. China has about 140 humanoid robot makers, exporting more than 10,000 AI bionic robots, meaning human or animal-like robots, to 90 countries in the first half of 2026.
请给我一瓶水。
If you're buying a drink at the conference, a humanoid takes your order. SenseMart Go, owned by Chinese AI giant SenseTime, has 20 convenience stores in China, manned by these robots, and is planning hundreds more. The company says each convenience store can break even within a year or so.
是机器人这个本体，在去年的时候，动辄一个机器人本体就几十万。那我们现在呢，随着国内的这个机器人的这个产业链越来越完整，然后呢，出货量越来越大，我们把机器人本体降到了非常低的价格。我们自己背后的这个大模型的能力增强了之后，会让这个机器人的每天交付的能力会变强，它交付的会变多，啊，这个双向走起来，它会形成这样的一个效应。 双向的效应，一个成本下降，一个每天的 GMV 提升，以这样的逻辑。
More than 1,000 companies are showing their latest technology, and some 300 products made their debut here. There's added importance. President Xi Jinping gave an opening speech on Friday, the Chinese leader's first appearance at the yearly event since it started in 2018.
Exhibitors tell me it was harder to secure booth space at this year's World AI Conference. Public tickets were sold out. A few people I know could not get one. All this a sign of the excitement around artificial intelligence.
China is moving fast, and its largest AI show is a snapshot of where it stands in the artificial intelligence race. Crystal Chia, CNA, Shanghai.
Let's look on East Asia tonight. A growing obesity crisis in China driving demand for weight loss camps, as drawing customers even from abroad. Spain triumphs in a battle of endurance against Argentina to win their second World Cup. Private weight loss camps in China are attracting growing interest, not just from locals, but increasingly from overseas visitors. A trend as Beijing steps up efforts to tackle obesity, with more than half of Chinese adults now overweight or obese. Rebecca Mateo spent a day at one such camp to find out what life there is like.
There's no hitting the snooze button at this weight loss camp in Beijing's Miyun district.
起床，有氧。
And that's my cue to get moving too. First up, 40 minutes of cardio before breakfast. The treadmill is set to a steep incline and I'm already working up a sweat. But that's only the warm-up. The day starts at 7:45 a.m. and doesn't end until 8 p.m. with 5 exercise sessions in between. From step aerobics to spin sessions and circuit-style workouts, the goal is to build strength and burn fat.
怎么样？不容易。It's not easy, but they're all doing very well. 累不累？
很难。然后下背收紧，挺胸，对，吸气。
I'm also told that students can pay an extra fee for private coaching. Participants can also get guidance on how to use these strength training equipment safely. Most participants stay for at least 28 days. Some remain even longer to reach their target weight.
除了是影响健康了，还是因为太胖找不到工作。
就是现在减完肥之后，然后就是形象提升了嘛，然后别人就会更信赖我，觉得我更专业一点。
Both in their early 20s, Wang Yan and Kang Jingru have each lost between 2 and 5 kilograms after about 2 weeks in the program.
根据自己的身体状况慢慢来呗，然后过渡一下。现在已经每节课差不多都能跟上了。
我们需要有这个强度嘛，然后我就得跟上这个强度。对。
Coaches also keep a close eye on what participants eat. Food deliveries aren't allowed, and surprise room inspections help enforce the rules.
那上回那布朗尼是谁的？
Meals are carefully planned to support the training program. Sauces are largely off the menu, with vinegar and black pepper among the few condiments available. It's 5:30 p.m. dinner time. On the menu today, we have multi-grain rice, sweet potatoes, some vegetables, lean protein, and fruit. A variety of dishes are served throughout the day, but the idea remains the same, to provide participants with a healthy and balanced diet.
饮食大概占6到7成这样，剩下才是训练。但是饮食加运动的效果是远远强于只做饮食的。
Wow, I'm definitely going to be sore tomorrow. But after spending a day here, I think the real challenge is not the exercise, it's sticking to the routine. And I think the bigger test comes after the participants go home and try to maintain these habits on their own.
Rebecca Mateo joins us now live from Beijing. Rebecca, I think you've answered your own question there, saying the test is whether or not one can continue this regime. And that may be one reason why camps like that are popular, because they make you follow a regime.
Yeah, that's right, Wei-Su. So it was definitely physically demanding, but I think another big challenge was really the discipline and resilience it takes, because you have to keep showing up every day and push through the day no matter how tired you are. And I think that's exactly why these camps are popular, because they provide the know-how, the structure, and most importantly the accountability, which many people could struggle to maintain on their own. And Wei-Su, to give you some context, is that China places greater emphasis on tackling obesity, and in fact in 2024 authorities launched a nationwide 3-year weight management campaign to keep this in check. And the second point is really about social media. So I spoke to a Singaporean participant, Alexis Tan, who went for a camp in the Guangdong province after seeing social media posts about these camps, and she saw an Australian attending it, and she saw positive reviews of Malaysians, and she decided, let's just go for it. And in about 2 weeks' time, she lost about 4 kilograms. And I got in touch with the camp that she went to, and the camp operator told me that after when her post went viral, they actually received around 40 inquiries in a short period of time, mostly coming from Singapore as well as Malaysia. And the last point is really about the cost. I think cost is also part of the appeal. For example, the Beijing camp that I went to, a 28-day stay costs around $590 to $890, and that includes meals and accommodation as well as training. And it also depends on the type of room that you choose to stay in. But for the camp that Alexis went to is slightly more expensive. That means that prices are also at a range. So for hers, if you choose to stay in a hotel for a month, it's around $1,500. So let's have a listen to what she has to say.
If I could slim down further from my plateau weight of 78 kg, sure, why not? And from this whole camp, if I can have a change of mindset, I think that would be my best takeaway.
Rebecca, though, is this healthy? What do health experts say?
Well, so Dr. Charles Poon from Raffles Hospital, Beijing, says that obesity is really a global challenge. And because it's a large population here in China, researchers estimate that China has the largest number of adults living with obesity or being overweight. And that number stands at around 402 million based on the 2021 data. And that's more than double compared to that of the United States at 172 million. And he says that as more people are looking for different ways to lose weight, Dr. Poon says that these camps are still beneficial because they provide structure and accountability, but still they're not a one-size-fits-all solution. And he said that a healthy progress of weight loss is around, say, 0.5 kilogram to 1 kilogram per week, and that in certain groups of people should in fact be more careful about going for these camps. Let's have a listen.
Older people tend to have more medical conditions. They have cardiac problems, they have high blood pressure, diabetes, and the sort of thing. So all these things need to be screened before they embark on this kind of programs. Then, of course, those who are young, of an age of, especially below 12, but preferably, I think, below 16, they should be very careful.
So researchers warn that without effective intervention, nearly 2 in 3 Chinese adults could be overweight by 2030, and that's just 4 years away. They also projected that obesity-related healthcare spendings could account for more than 20% of China's healthcare costs. So that really added to the urgency to push for earlier intervention as well as healthier lifestyles.
Oh, thanks, Rebecca Mateo, there, surviving that weight loss boot camp just to bring this report to us. So Rebecca Mateo speaking to us there from Beijing. After 39 days, 104 matches and more than 300 goals, the FIFA Men's Football World Cup has come to a close in the New York, New Jersey stadium. A tense game that went to extra time was settled by a solitary goal as Spain emerged victorious, claiming their second ever tournament win. Scenes of jubilation at the full-time whistle as fans celebrated in a fan zone in Madrid. Hordes of supporters decked out in the national team's trademark red jerseys, celebrating long into the night.
Como algo muy emocionante. Lo hemos merecido desde el minuto número 1. Desde el minuto 1 lo hemos merecido y nada, pues al final se sabe que somos una gran afición y nos lo merecemos. Nos lo merecemos la segunda.
Una emoción única del minuto 1 al minuto 120. Magnífico. ¡Viva España!
Spain adding World Cup glory to their European crown after Ferran Torres scored the only goal of the game. Spain had dominated throughout the match with 12 shots on target, with Argentina failing to test Unai Simon at all in 120 minutes. In Buenos Aires, Argentinians mourn the end of an era as the defending champions crash out in what is likely to be Lionel Messi's farewell to football's greatest stage. Argentinian President Javier Milei, who did not attend the match, took to X to thank his national team, saying they fought until the end, as he wrote that his country will always stand tall. Spain victorious in front of more than 80,000 fans, including US President Donald Trump, who handed out the trophy to the Spanish team. The final also including a controversial extended halftime show featuring the likes of Madonna, Shakira and Justin Bieber, which stretched to 27 minutes. That's Monday's edition of East Asia Tonight. For our Singapore audience, stay on for our highlights from the FIFA World Cup final.
The longest World Cup in history reached its climax at the New York, New Jersey Stadium. European champions Spain versus reigning world champions Argentina in a blockbuster matchup. On paper, the match, though, turned out to be a tight affair with more stars in the stands than shots on the field as the first half finished goalless. Second half, and Spain ventured further into Argentinian territory, dominating the match, but still no goal for supporters in the stands as the stars on the pitch struggled to shine. Argentina were then reduced to 10 men after midfielder Enzo Fernandez saw red in the 92nd minute for this tackle, becoming the first Argentine to be sent off in the final since 1990. Despite the advantage, Spain could not overcome Argentina goalkeeper Emi Martinez's heroics to keep the defending champions in the game. Spain continued the search for a goal in extra time and had the ball in the back of the net, only for it to be ruled out for a foul. But in the 106th minute, Spanish pressure finally told against the Argentinians, with Ferran Torres slamming home what would be the winner. The first substitute to score in the final since 2014, his goal would be enough as Spain held on to win this match 1-0. The reign of Lionel Messi's Argentina as world champions ended, passing on to the European champions, Spain winning the World Cup for only the second time in its history.